Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denisa. So today you are in for a treat as I sit down with Lee Rosenberg, one of the top family law attorneys on Long Island. He's also principal at Saltzman Chetkof and Rosenberg in Garden City, New York. Lee is a man who wears many hats. He's obviously a highly experienced attorney. He's a prolific writer. He's a devoted father and a husband, and he's a great musician. He is just a personality you are going to want to know better. Lee, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Denisa. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm not sure about the great musician part, but I'll take the rest of the accolades any day.
So, I do have a couple of events in mind that you shared with me. We chatted briefly, and I'm curious. So, you originally went to college to teach social studies. And so, how did that, and also discovering your father's yearbook, influence your decision to go into law?
Well, so yes, I originally was going to teach. I enjoyed social studies and history, and by the time I got to my junior year of college, I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do that anymore. And all my friends seemed to be taking the LSATs, and I said, okay, well, let me give that a shot. And I did, and ended up in law school, and still was not sure exactly what area of law I was going to practice in. My father was a builder, and when you mentioned his yearbook, I actually did not find the yearbook until after my father died. So I was already a practicing lawyer in the matrimonial field, and my father passed away in 2003, and but I went to law school, came out, and I was doing real estate law. I was doing that in Queens, landlord tenant, with a little bit of matrimonial, a little bit of personal injury, and then I ended up going from Queens out here to Long Island, and I was hired essentially to do real estate work. The firm represented Barclays Bank at the time, and we had multiple closings going on throughout the day, sometimes multiple closings going on simultaneously in different conference rooms. And then I found one day I was doing a lot of litigation. I was in court, in family court. I was doing personal injury, and I went to Bill Salzman at the time, and I said, "Hey, listen, I was hired to do real estate, and I'm doing all of this litigation." And he said to me, "Well, do you have a problem with that?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll let you know." And next thing I knew, I was doing no real estate, and I was doing all litigation, and ultimately all matrimonial and family law litigation, and have not really looked back ever since. Um, but to go back to my father's yearbook, after my father had passed away, I had found that my father and both my parents from Brooklyn, and my father went to Boys High, and he graduated in 1941. And I found his yearbook, and in the yearbook it said that his ambition was to go to be an attorney. And I had no idea. Obviously I didn't have a chance to ask him about it because he had already passed away. But was just kind of a full circle kind of thing that ultimately, even though we didn't discuss it, I was really fulfilling the ambition that he had and never got a chance to accomplish because 1941, World War II breaks out. He never goes to college and certainly did not go to law school, but he self-educated himself and knew a lot about a lot of things. And but here I am, and who knew?
Yeah. Wow. Carrying on almost like his legacy, if you will, an
Apparently so.
unspoken one. Yeah. Wow. We talked about how many cases are emotionally laden, obviously, given the nature of what that is. You mentioned that you compartmentalize to handle the emotional aspect of your job. How do you balance that with not losing empathy for your clients?
Well, you know, I tell clients that I can't ride the emotional roller coaster with them because obviously a divorce or a family law situation is amongst the most stressful things that a person can go through in life. And because of that, one of us has to think clearly. Somebody has to be having a perspective that is relatively dispassionate, that has the ability to choose right from wrong, the best course. And while it's certainly the end result is the client's final decision, settlement, trial, terms, those kinds of things, during the course of the matter, because there is so much emotion involved, at the very least, I have to be the one who's thinking clearly. And, I will tell clients right from the get go, because you have to manage their expectations. And I tell them that they will get the truth from me from the day we meet till the day we part ways. And if that's the initial consultation, so be it. But I'm not there to tell them what they want to hear. I'm there to
Mm.
tell them the truth as I see it, whether they like it or not. And if they're looking for someone to tell them something else, then I'm sorry, but I'm not the person for them. So you have to be objective. You have to certainly be empathetic, as you say, but you also have to be truthful and try to guide them down a path that is hopefully not only successful, but uh, the best result based upon the facts and circumstances that you're dealing with.
That makes a lot of sense. You can empathize, but you do not need to project your own personal self into the situation because they're essentially leaning on you to guide them, to advocate, and so you have to sort of detach yourself emotionally, if you will. That doesn't mean you don't have feelings. And that is an
Right.
interesting discussion that I have on these podcasts with other practitioners. You are one of your other many hats. You are a prolific writer. And the one publication that I'm personally familiar with is you're the editor of Family Law Review, which is a prestigious publication of the family law section of the New York State Bar Association. But generally, if you think about all the different pieces that you have authored, you've written, which one would you say you're most proud of and why?
Well, that's hard to say because I've written quite a lot, as you know, and thank you, by the way, because your article appears in the most recently published issue of Family Law Review. So I thank you for that. I think that what I have found, and I believe that in doing what I do, that I have this bizarre notion that I have the ability to make a difference, not only for my clients, but for the practice of law. And whether or not that's a flight of fancy or not, um, it's something that I believe that I can do. And if I can do that, whether it's in the courtroom or by writing, I find that very satisfying. Few examples. Uh, I wrote on no fault divorce quite a bit before it was finally enacted. Um, I wrote on maintenance guidelines when it was first enacted, and found that one of the pieces that I had written was actually referenced in the first appellate division decision that addressed the flaws in the statute. A case called Kira v. Kira out of the First Department. Um, I know that I've also been cited on various issues by the New York State Law Revision Commission. And so those kinds of things, I guess, bear out that not just me, but those of us who believe that they can make a difference actually can. There are some laws that have been tried to be passed most recently in Albany, and I was amongst a group of great colleagues who went up to Albany, and we were able to kind of push back on some of these, one of these particular proposed pieces of legislation that was not particularly good, and we were able to hold that off. I really enjoy the collaboration with my colleagues. And so those kinds of issues, certain issues relating to children, that I've been able to participate in and help and lecture on. So those kinds of things. It's really hard to pinpoint, but those are a couple of examples.
There are different channels where you can express that passion that you have. Um,
Yeah, I did just
you
like
know,
usually when I write on something, it's usually something that annoys me, something that I see, that is in a court decision, something I'm working on, and I find that it's just wrong, or a court has made a decision that I find incorrect, in some fashion, or correct in some fashion, and it spurs me on to action.
I love it. It's one voice at a time. When you say you really are trying to make a difference, it is not just a lip service. And there are many people who complain, but they never participate in sort of changing, right? Making changes. And so what I'm hearing is, okay, if I'm observing something can be done differently, I don't agree with something, something is triggering me, I do something about it, whether it's writing or speaking. So I now I understand better what you mean by making a difference. This is not just a tagline. You truly mean it.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not the only one, and I'm sure you've spoken with many of my colleagues. Um, I
Yes.
believe there's going to be a piece in the New York Law Journal that I worked on with several of my colleagues while we were in Washington D.C. for the AFCC AAML conference on advanced issues in child custody, and that's the Association of Family and Conciliatory Courts and the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers program. But a bunch of us were speaking in person and or emailing back and forth because there was an item in the New York Law Journal that cited incorrect law, and so we collaborated, and that should be coming out. But it's another example of something we see that is wrong and needs to be corrected.
2020 was a tough year for you, with the loss of your longtime law partner and paralegal. How did you keep your vision intact, during such trying time?
Well, 2020 was a tough year for everybody. A tough year for families. One of those situations where even families who were in great relationships had difficulty. Certainly, families who were under stress had harder times. And keeping the top on a boiling pot has to explode at some point in time. And we saw a lot of litigation coming out of the pandemic. We had some losses in the office in 2020, but I mean, essentially, um, I made the decision that we were just going to do what we needed to do because, first of all, for me personally, I'm responsible for a lot of people in my office, and they have families, and I'm responsible for the well-being of the people I represent, and I'm responsible for my own family. And so the choices were to kind of sit and contemplate with doing nothing, or to just say, okay, let's go. And I think I was home for about a week, and that was all I can sit and work from home for. And then I was like, okay, I'm going in the office. I may be the only one in the office and having everybody else work remotely, but so be it. I have a job to do. The doors are not closing. That's certainly not an option. Um, we had a lot of custody problems amongst people during the pandemic. Some people using the pandemic to restrict access to another parent. Certainly when the vaccine started rolling out, we had a lot of differences in terms of one parent saying yes to vaccine for children, others saying no. Uh, Certainly, there was a lot of politics involved in that, a lot of misinformation. And so there was a lot of litigation, especially because the courts, while they were open per se, you could not file a new divorce case, for example. It had to be exigent
Mm.
in order to get your foot on a new filing in the courts. And so there was a lot of that. So, again, you can do nothing or you can do what you need to do.
You became a dad at age 50, I think, and you are a very involved dad. And you
Yeah.
shared with me, you have a great bond with your son. It almost sounded like he's an old soul, but you said something to him, if I remember correctly, that you said, I'm your father, not your friend." What is that about, and how does that, if at all, translate into your practice as a family lawyer?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, I was a father for the first time at 50. Uh, um, don't relish the ongoing fight against against getting older, but we do what we can. Pardon me. And try and stave off the hands of time as best we can. And I certainly cop to my own vanity. That's certainly without question. Just ask my wife. And but
I just
yeah,
might.
I mean, I've got a very precocious and smart child who gets the best from both my wife and I. And because he's the age he is, and he loves his gaming and all the rest of that stuff. And at one point in time, he just out of what he's used to doing with his friends referred to me as bro or bruh. And I was like, listen to me carefully. Don't bro me. Don't bro me. I'm your father. I'm not your friend from school. And that's how it's going to be. I love you, but don't bro me.
Yeah,
And really, I kind of parent to a great extent much differently than how I was raised and parented. And it's a matter of a different generation of upbringing. I certainly had a very nice upbringing, but it was not the hugs and I love yous and the effusiveness of love that I engage in with my son. My wife, to the contrary, grew up in a very loving household with the I love yous and the hugs and all the rest of it. Um, but I tell my son that he gets all of that I did not necessarily get when I was a child, even though I had a very good upbringing. It was just different. And so I think, everybody's life experience informs how you then change as you grow. Stagnant behavior and an unwillingness to be self aware is not helpful for anybody. It's not always an easy quality for people to come upon, but you have to be able to understand what you need to do, and you take your life experiences. Now, some people refer to it in some ways as confirmatory bias, for example.
well,
Everybody comes with their own biases. The question is, do you recognize those biases, and what are you going to do about it? And
right.
so I recognized that um, I needed to and wanted to parent in a different way. And I think because I started out as an older parent, when my son was born, I was chair of the Nassau Matrimonial Committee in the Nassau County Bar Association. I was on the board of directors of the Nassau Bar. I was involved with Family Law Review uh, and the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. I was traveling. I was writing. I was trying cases. I had a very extensive practice. I was running the practice. I had the vast bulk of all of the cases in the office, and I was running everything. And so initially, and my son, when he was born, there was some respiratory issues, and he went to the NICU from the hospital he was born in over to Cohen's at LIJ, and I got in my car and actually beat the ambulance over there, but I still took off probably a total of 3 or 4 days, all told, when my son was born. And I remember coming out of the hospital and calling Bill Saltzman at the time and saying, "Don't worry, I'll be in the office tomorrow." And I got a matrimonial law committee meeting. And Bill said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're not getting this time back. Smarten up." And, it took the light bulb kind of to say, okay, because I was very old school in terms of, again, how I was brought up. And, my father was the, business person, and my mother was home with three of us. And really, that was my frame of reference. I had a job to do, and I was going to do it because I had responsibilities, not thinking, hey, wait a second. I got other responsibilities, including my wife, who just had a C-section, and my son, who was about to go to the NICU. And so a bit of an epiphany and saying, okay, I got to rethink this a little bit. And so you do. And that informs how you convey responsibility as well to your clients. Because that's, for me, my favorite thing to be is to be my son's father. And I tell him that when he was a little baby. What's my favorite thing to be? My dad. Right. And sometimes I'll just say to him, okay, I have a question for you. I know, I know. And so he remembers that. And really, that's our function. We helped bring someone into the world. We have a responsibility.
Wow. You took it a step further, um, because you recognize that you've accumulated certain preferences and certain biases, like we all do through life. And you're right. You have a choice to make. You can bring it into your new relationship, into raising your children, into your practice, but it will catch up with you. And instead of recognizing, okay, all right, this is not my past. I am not my parents. And sometimes it takes a certain event, certain wake up call. So it sounds like the birth of your son was that defining moment for you. And you truly are making a difference, even on a personal front. Staying with the family, I understand you're a very musical family. I understand that you've been playing guitar, I think, since the age of 10. Your son plays, your wife plays. Is that right?
Yeah. And, parenting wise, I certainly do not mean to come off as if I take anywhere near the lion's share of credit. I mean, my wife works full time. My wife's an optician, and she's a phenomenal parent. And I don't know that, because of my schedule, um, and this also gets conveyed to those of my clients who, come in and they say, I want 50-50 time.
Mm,
And I'll say to them, can you do 50-50% of the time? Because if you can't, don't ask for it, because you're going to be disappointing your child or children every day when you can't do it. And I know that I
yes.
couldn't do what my wife does. And sometimes, I'll say to I'll find myself yelling at my clients, and I'll be like, why do I care more than you do? Why am I yelling at
Mm.
you? Because you're not listening, because you're doing the wrong thing. So smarten up. That being said, to answer your question, um, yeah, I've been playing since I'm 10, and I've got a lot of guitars. It's that old saying about, do you really need another guitar? And the answer is, Not really, but it is what it is. I actually had to sneak a few in the house, but I got caught. Yeah, so my son plays keyboards, and he started out playing drums probably when he was 4 or 5, and then didn't like doing that, and then navigated to keyboards, and he's very, very good at it. My wife doesn't play anything anymore, but she played violin, viola, stand-up bass. My
Wow.
father-in-law plays guitar, mandolin, banjo.
Wow.
So hopefully there's some degree of musical ability that is permeating through through my son, who seems to have both sides of the brain in terms of the mathematical and artistic. So um, he's
Wow.
great. He's great.
That is awesome. Music runs through your veins, all of you. Um, that is so much fun. So, Lee, what would be your final words of wisdom that you would love to impart on to incoming attorneys, to help them build a rewarding career, not just to maintain a job, because this is not a job. There's so many layers to what you do.
Right. And, uh, I tell lawyers or young lawyers or law students, it's not a job. It is a profession. There is a difference. This is not 9 to 5. Um, and I like young lawyers. I always have. There were some lawyers who were very established, who were very kind to me when I was kind of starting out, and they didn't have to be. And it's kind of like a pay it forward kind of thing. But I like young lawyers, and sometimes if I'm in court and I've got somebody who's relatively inexperienced, and I'll say, don't do that. You don't want to do it that way. That's a mistake. Don't take my word for it. But here's the law. Go check with your boss and validate what I'm saying to you. I don't want you to do anything that just because I'm telling you, but what you're doing is a problem. Don't create a problem for yourself, but check it. Because nobody wants to hurt someone, by doing this. You certainly have obligations to your client, but you don't want to put someone in an untenable position. Um, but there's all kinds of lawyers. There's certainly bad lawyers, and a lot of those dabble in this particular area, and you can't dabble anymore.
Mm.
It's like medicine. You can't. You're specialized. There are very few general practitioners because there's too much to know. There's too many nuances, and we always find problems when somebody tries to dabble in this, and it creates havoc. It's impediments to settlements. You got unnecessary litigation. It makes the judges crazy. Makes me crazy. Um, but there are bad lawyers. There are okay lawyers. There are lawyers who have their function. Uh, it used to be there was an inside person and an outside person. The lawyer who would spend the time doing paperwork, and then there's the outside person who would either bring in business or go to court and try cases. I'm fortunate that I do all of it, and I've done all of it, perhaps to my
Mm.
mental detriment, depending on who you ask, for a really,
That's
really
honest.
long period of time. Um, but then there are lawyers who are good lawyers and great lawyers, and then the lawyers who want to make a difference. And I always want to know, which one do you want to be?
Mm.
Because if you want to be the kind of lawyer who wants to make a difference, if you want to be a great lawyer, it takes effort, it takes commitment. Um, and when you have that, you make a positive difference in the practice. You make a positive difference in a courtroom. You make a positive difference for yourself and your own life and your family's life. And you make a difference for your clients, for their families, and or a system of justice. So, what do you want to be?
Great advice. Great advice, Lee. Thank you so much. This has been very enlightening and to get to know you, some of your layers. And thank you so much for sharing your journey, your wisdom, and really passion for law and life.
Well, it's my pleasure. I am happy to be here with you as always. And I will see you around in the courthouse or at the Bar Association or in the pages of Family Law Review whenever you want to submit something.
Thank you so much. And to our viewers and listeners, to find out more about Lee Rosenberg, click on his bio link below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast, and follow us on social media channels. Until next week, stay curious and inspired.